Okay, we are back. So far, so good. I'm gonna roll with this. Yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and roll with this. So, oh yeah, okay. Okay, so we're gonna roll with this right now, and I might have to adjust as things go on. So, yeah, as I was explaining in the last stream before I cut this one off, or before I cut the last one off, you know, I changed a few things from the previous shows because I didn't like my audio, and the audio has gotten, noticeably better. So I do like that. And I wanted to change some things in terms of like the presentation of the stream as well. So now that I've done that, and now that things look a little bit better, we are going to get started with today's show. Let me go ahead and pin that. Make sure everything is good to go. Hold on one second. Okay, we are back. So far, so good. All right, so yeah, so just like I said, if you're listening to this and you can't hear me clearly, or the video buffering in and out and stuff like that, send me a message on Twitter, or send me a message, or just put something in the chat, and I'll see what I can do on my end. We might have to just wait until this show is over, and then I'll have to fix some things as we go along later on for the next show, because like I said, this is a work in progress. So I'm still working some things out on my end, but I don't want to politic for too long. I want to go ahead and get started with the show. So there are going to be 4 things that I touch on today. 4 stories that I want to touch on today. If you're watching this, share the video on Twitter, Facebook, wherever you are, just so we can get some more people in, and like the video as well, because I want to touch on a few things. I want to touch on 4 things in particular. I want to touch on this story that I saw in Atlanta Black Star about a town in Alabama called Africatown. And there's an interesting history to this town and what's actually going on to this town, and how a lot of the long-term residents, the residents that have been there historically, how a lot of them, a majority of them, are coming down with cancer and have been coming down with cancer for some time now. So I want to touch on that. I want to touch on a story from several places I saw it originally, and it's based on a study from the Economic Policy Institute about black people and comparing us and the progress we've made today versus where we were in 1968. That's a very interesting discussion. And then I want to touch on a story about Akon and how this is going to be a short story about how he wanted to help out Puerto Rico using the company that he helped to found, that uses solar energy to bring energy to Africa, to different regions and different countries in Africa, and how that was basically shut down. And then the last story I want to touch on is a story that I know I am extremely late to. Okay, I know I'm very late to this story, but it's a story that needs to be talked about, and it's the story about what's going on with Monique right now on Netflix. So, and how she wants basically the black community to boycott Netflix. Everybody has their opinions about that show. Everybody has their 2 cents about not that show. Everybody has their own opinions about that story and their 2 cents about that story. And so I know I'm late as hell to it, but I definitely want to touch on that because I think that's very important. Okay. Hold on one second, family. I'm checking something out. I know I just got super quiet, but it's like when you start getting real, like going and real deep into stuff, all of a sudden things start like going haywire and getting all messed up on you and not working properly. If you're listening to this, I will be posting the recorded video of this whole stream on my YouTube channel, just in case, like, you know, this particular stream keeps going in and out. I'm gonna have to work on the settings because my voice, you know what I'm saying, I got that working right, you know, so you can hear me clearly now, but there's a lot of issues going on with Streamlabs and the audio encoding, where it's not transitioning properly to the stream itself, so it's causing a lot of lagging on both YouTube and Periscope. So I'm just gonna continue with the stream, and I'll just end up having to post it once it's done, and then, you know, if you can't hear me clearly now, you'll definitely be able to hear me once the whole thing gets posted onto my YouTube channel. So yeah, so let's get started. So Africatown. Now, for those of you who don't know, the history behind Africatown, it goes back to the transatlantic slave trade. Okay, well, at least the last transatlantic voyage of Africans kidnapped from the continent and illegally brought to America. Okay, this happened on the eve of the Civil War, and a few years later, after the Civil War was over, after these Africans were kidnapped from the continent. And by the way, this was, like I said, it was illegal because the transatlantic slave trade had been banned and abolished for several decades. Now, they had their internal slave trade that was still going on. So the internal slave trade continued, you know, well after the transatlantic slave trade was abolished. But you see, after the Haitian Revolution, a lot of people in America realized, okay, we need to cut down on these Africans that we're bringing to America because we don't want a Haiti situation. So because of the Haitian Revolution, they ended up abolishing the transatlantic slave trade, right? Now, this didn't stop people from continuing to kidnap Africans from the continent, from Africa, and to bring them overseas, to bring them, you know, here to the United States. And that continued, and like I said, this last voyage, a few years before the Civil War broke out, had the same people. It was about 100 Africans. These Africans would eventually start this town in Alabama along the Mobile River, and it would become known as Africatown. And so these people got their freedom, and their descendants still live in the area. Many of their descendants still live in the area, and I was doing some research, and it showed that 10,000 people at one point in time lived in the town. It had a population of about 10,000 people. Okay, now the population is around 3,000 people. So it was never a huge town to begin with. Okay, but it was a large enough town. And because of environmental racism, a lot of the people in that town are coming down with illnesses. Let me read this article to you guys from Atlanta Black Star. Okay, it says, hold on, I'm having a bunch of ads pop up. People want to call me on my phone during my live stream. So yeah, let me read this article to you from Atlanta Black Star. It says, in the spring of 1860, a year before the Civil War, a wealthy Alabama shipbuilder and plantation owner named Timothy Mayer, whatever, I might be mispronouncing his name. Basically, this wealthy ship owner and shipbuilder chose to toy with the escalating tensions between the North and the South. by making a despicable wager. And it basically goes into, his whole plan to go to Dahomey, the kingdom of Dahomey, which we all know the Dora Milaje were based off of women from that area. And it says that he purchased 100 Africans for his plantation. And the captives would be returned to Mobile, Alabama, without being detected by the federal troops guarding the nearby port. Because like I explained a second ago, this was illegal at this particular point in time. And, hold on. Let me put my phone on mute. Okay, there we go. So it basically goes into the voyage itself and how they ultimately escaped prosecution. The men that were involved escaped prosecution, but the captives would not escape enslavement. But 5 years later, the Civil War would end, and upon gaining their freedom, the Africans of that voyage, the ones that survived at least, which was, by the way, the last known ship to have carried Africans into the United States, they were able to petition Mayer and the American government to return them to Dahomey, and basically the U.S. government refused to do it. So they established this township, and they built schools, they built churches, and this was in 1866, because this was one of the first black communities set up by black people after the end of the Civil War. And they had their own, they were, well, first of all, they had to be self-sufficient. They had no choice, really. So they had to build everything themselves, but they were able to retain their West African languages, their customs, their agriculture, and their spiritual traditions. Okay, so check this out. Over the years, you would have let me see, because this is the Atlanta Black Star article. Let me pull up the article from The Guardian, because that one goes into some detail as well. Because it goes into how, so I didn't put this in the link in the description for the video, but I will after this video is over, after the stream is over. Because what ended up happening was, you would have a plant that would get built by the same descendants who own land, the same descendants of the white descendants of the people who owned that ship that brought the Africans across initially. They owned a lot of the land in the area, and they would eventually build I'm looking for the name of the company now. Okay. They would eventually build a petrochemical plant. And like a lot of those types of plants, they are highly pollutive to the environment. And this was going on in the 70s. And okay, here we go. International Paper. That's the name of the plant. This is from the Guardian article. So let me read the Guardian article. It says, today the mostly black, low-income community has more than just a unique history as an against the odds bolt hole of black independence in the Reconstruction South. Residents say they have also had serious industrial pollution and public health problems, and a group of about 1,200 have launched a lawsuit against the owners of a now shuttered paper plant that was built in 1928 on land that was then owned by A. Mayer Jr. So, like I said, the same family that brought these Africans or kidnapped these Africans from Africa and brought them over to America in the 1860s, their descendants owned a lot of the land in that area. And in the 1920s, they would eventually start a petrochemical plant that's now defunct. The plant has been, down for like 20 years, so it's not even up and running anymore. But for decades, that plant was just spewing all types of toxins into the air. And there are stories, if you read the Guardian article, there are stories from residents who said that like the the weather, not the weather, but the toxic fumes were so thick and the toxic fumes were so heavy, okay, that the ash would come down and the ash would actually be putting holes into the roofs of the buildings, so the roofs of the homes. So that's why you look today and you see there aren't that many people actually living in Africatown anymore, and there's a reason for that. It's because of the conditions that they live in, and how, you know, a lot of these companies just treat black people like, you know, like they can do whatever with us. You know what I'm saying? So let me continue. It says people born after 1945 seem to be dying before the age of 65, said one of the residents, who grew up in the area during the heyday of the International Paper Plant that drew thousands of workers to that area. But according to some of the residents, spewed ash across the town. So you had this black town that was sitting, you know, not too far away from this plant, and the plant was completely just polluting the hell out of the area. Just complete and total disregard of the local residents. The lawsuit claims International Paper was responsible for the release of hazardous chemicals into the air and local environment, and notes that these have been linked to bad health outcomes, including cancer. It further claims International Paper failed to properly clean up the site when it closed 20 years ago. Now, of course, the firm denies all of these allegations, right? So that's basically where they stand. And Africatown residents were able to remain independent, self-governed under African traditions and languages, and they eventually were able to save enough money to buy land from their former owners. That's how they were able to get the land for Africatown to begin with. But this story is so depressing because you see so many instances like this, whether it's Africatown, that they have destroyed and supplanted so many black towns and communities across the country. You think everybody knows about Black Wall Street, but you have Black Wall Street, you know, Tulsa, Oklahoma. You have this story about Africatown. Okay, you have Rosewood. You have Seneca Village in New York, you know, also known as Central Park, because a lot of people don't know that Central Park used to be a black town that was destroyed. Okay, there are a lot of places, man. I'm not even going into all of them. There are so many places where this has been an issue. And today we talk about gentrification. Okay, but gentrification is just one aspect of a continuation of a problem. And it's the legacy of the displacement of black communities. And the shuffling of black communities and how a lot of our communities, especially our oldest communities, okay, a lot of the communities that we have today wouldn't have been there 50 years ago. Some of them might have been, but so many of our communities, especially the ones that were doing really well, were destroyed. You know, they were shut down, they were gentrified. And it's not just gentrification, though. It's also environmental racism. You can add that to the equation, because you talk about what's going on in Africatown right now with the pollution from this petrochemical plant that shut down 20 years ago, and they didn't properly clean up the area, so you still have toxic waste and toxic chemicals all throughout that area. But then think about Flint, Michigan. We can't forget about Flint. Okay, we cannot forget about Flint. When you look at America today and you see how we're hard pressed to find solidified and successful black communities that go back over a century, that go back over 100 years, you have to look at things like this. You have to look at things like gentrification, environmental racism, and the history of destroying black communities and black towns. Okay, The only reason the black population is so large in many major urban areas today is because of white flight during and after the civil rights movement. We all know this. So the black concentration in major cities is historically a recent phenomenon because white Americans fled to suburban towns in states all over the country to avoid being around black folks. So you look at a lot of places today, and you see a lot of places today with these large black populations, and you think it's always been like that, and that's not the case. But I wanted to touch on that story because it's one of those, you guys know I like doing stories about topics that don't get a lot of attention, and I knew that wasn't going to get a lot of attention, so I definitely wanted to cover that. But definitely read that Guardian article. And you can actually just go to Google right now, go to Google and type in Africatown, and the Guardian article should be like one of the top 5 links that you can click on, and just read that story. It's a really interesting story, and it's, like I said, it's a continuation of what we've seen occur with a lot of black towns historically. So I'm gonna save the story about the Economic Policy Institute. I'm gonna save that for Friday, because this stream is, it's not my audio now, and it's not the picture. It's Streamlabs. The problem is Streamlabs, and the problem is the stream going in and out a lot. Hold on one second. Let me see if I can hear myself. Give me 1 second, family. Today, the mostly black, low-income community has more than just a unique history, as in against the harm. Hold on 1 second. You see, this still isn't running as smoothly as I wanted to. It's still not running as smoothly as I wanted to, so there's still some kinks that I need to work out. But I'm progressing, but there's still some kinks I need to work out. So I'm a cut this stream. I'm a cut off one of these stories. Actually, I'm gonna cut off 2 of the stories, and I might even do a special show tomorrow. Just to cover these stories that I wanted to go over, but at the same time, I don't want to do a long stream and people can't hear me clearly, and people are leaving and going in and out because the stream keeps lagging, and it's not running as smoothly as it should. And I want this to be crisp, so I'm gonna cut off 2 of the stories, and I'm gonna jump right to this story with Monique, because that's what she is doing is really important, and a lot of people really aren't trying to give her her props like that, because she's challenging some really powerful people and some powerful voices. And you have people who have this cult of personality around certain individuals, and where people are kind of wanting to shush Monique because she's challenging Oprah and Lee Daniels and Tyler Perry, you know, which is basically the black establishment right now in Hollywood. And a lot of people are on this kick where they think that she should kind of just know her place instead of you know, challenging them. So what am I talking about? A lot of people know that she was on the Breakfast Club with Charlemagne and Angela Yee and everybody else, and she was also on The View. She was on Sway's Universe. Watch that interview she did on Sway's Universe, because that one was really good. I'm gonna actually play a 6-minute clip from that in a second. And I know I'm late as hell to this story because I don't typically cover entertainment related stuff, but I realized that this goes beyond entertainment. I usually cover politics and current events, and this is a current events topic, so it kind of falls under that umbrella. But I wanted to add my 2 cents to this story though, because she needs support. Now, people aren't going to. What she's basically trying to do is she wants to boycott Netflix, or she wants the community to boycott Netflix over gender bias, color bias, and age bias. And she was on the Breakfast Club, and she got a little. She was real. You know, she was cordial. She was respectful, and she didn't raise her voice or anything like that. But you could tell there was some tension there. You could tell there was some tension, and because Charlemagne made her donkey of the day because of her protest, and she's made some good points. And I find it very strange how people are very supportive of the Me Too movement, as they should be. Okay, but when you have Monique coming out and basically standing up for black female comedians, and how black female comedians are being grossly underpaid compared to even their black male counterparts. Okay, like Dave Chappelle, who I love Dave Chappelle, but compared to Dave Chappelle and Chris Rock, somebody else who I like a lot, who are getting paid, well over $15 million, and Amy Schumer, who's getting about $13 million, if I'm not mistaken. But the black female comedians are getting chump change, and they're not being given enough to sustain themselves compared to what their counterparts are getting. And Monique is making a very strong argument that, hey, I'm a legend too, and even Netflix and other groups of people, other people who have talked about this story, everybody admits that Monique is a legend, just as much of a legend as Dave Chappelle and Chris Rock, but she's not being paid like it. Netflix tried to give her $500,000, and she wasn't having it. And I think she's justified in, and me personally, I don't think it's even that she can't survive off of $500,000. That's not the issue. Okay, because you have a lot of people trying to make that argument. Oh, well, I would have taken the money. Because most people would have. Most people aren't being offered $500,000. Okay, most people don't have $500,000. Okay, so yeah, if a company like Netflix came to you and said, hey, we'll offer you $500,000, and you don't have the type of resume that Monique has, you haven't been around as much as Monique has been around, and you haven't done as much as she's done, yeah, most people would take $500,000, but you're not coming from her foundation. She has a foundation where, she deserves a lot more than that. And they tried to jip her. And I get the impression that a lot of it is because of this image that she has in the industry of being, quote, hard to work with. And what it really is, that's a smear. I don't really think she's hard to work with. She's had to check some people behind closed doors and behind the scenes because of how certain directors have been treated or mistreated by white producers and white executives, and she's known to check a lot of the white people behind the camera over like real slick stuff that they try to say to black actors and black actresses behind closed doors, which is a common thing in Hollywood, by the way. Okay, you see a lot of times, you see these celebrities, they get on television, especially during these interviews, and it's all smiles. You see them in these movies, and you can't tell what's going on behind stage or behind the camera in the movies themselves because they're acting. And so you don't really know what's really going on a lot of times, right? A lot of times these people are being dogged off camera and you don't really know, or they're being forced to, quote, play the game. And we all know what that means. Play the game means do what we want you to do or we'll destroy your career, which is what they tried to do to Monique. and it has had an effect ever since that whole situation with Precious blew up. I think I could be wrong about the movie. I think it was Precious. Since that whole situation blew up, and they wanted her to work for free, that's hit her in the pockets like big time, because of that whole situation, that whole public explosion with Lee Daniels and Oprah and Tyler Perry. You know, she's still making money. And when you listen to the Breakfast Club interview, you know, they kind of make it seem like, you know, she can make about $2 million over the course of like 2 years on her own. Because what Netflix wanted to do is Netflix wanted to lock her into a contract where they were trying to offer her $500,000 for 2 years. The thing about this contract was they didn't want her to do anything else. You know, so she couldn't do anything on her own. And so, you know, that was a problem. You know, they're basically asking her to take a pay cut, a $1.5 million pay cut. Okay, over a time span when she could make more than that independently. She can make more than that by herself. And ultimately, I hope she does go independent. I'm not exactly sure how she would do that. But, you know, there are a lot of people who would be able to help her out with that, definitely. And there are a lot of people who would love to have her on their platform. But let me read this to you guys. I'm gonna stop this video. Let's stop this music. I'm gonna stop the music out because I want to play this audio, this clip, this 6-minute clip from Sway's Universe. And I think this hits home. I think this summarizes this whole entire story. Not the entire story, but it gets to the heart of what this is all about. So listen to this. Hold on, let me turn up this okay, listen to this.
Thank you, Heather Day. You're welcome.
And let me stop before I play the video. The video is starting after Monique got one of the people who work with Sway to read an email that she got from Sony India. Because she's really big internationally. She's about to explain some things to you guys, because Netflix was basically saying, no, like, your resume doesn't really matter. We don't base what we pay people off of the resume. So she's showing, because they're basically trying to say, well, you know, their way for justifying paying her $500,000 or offering her $500,000